Today's video is going to pick up where we left off after my Welt 101 video. We're going to go ahead and take the bias strips that we cut out to make our welt, and I'm just going to show you how to sew them together, how to make your welt cord, and the easiest way to join your welt on your pillow. As you can see, I still have my pins marking my direction of my strips so I don't get them upside down or backwards or inside out. And all you need to do is take one strip, go ahead and pull it down till you find the other end, and we're going to join these two ends together. We're going to sew them together, but we're not going to sew them together in a straight line. Usually in sewing, what you'll see is people will just put these right sides together and sew a straight seam. On welt, it's really better to sew a diagonal seam. It seems counterintuitive, but a seam that is sewn straight across on welt is actually more noticeable to the eye when it's on the pillow than if it's cut on the diagonal. So the correct way to do it is to sew it on the diagonal. So in order to do that, all you do is you flip your strip 90 degrees like this, and you will sew from corner to corner. That's going to be your diagonal sewing line. And pretend that we've sewn that line. You will have a really nice diagonal strip. If you're working with a solid fabric or a fabric that has a very small pattern or a very random print, you don't really even have to think about pattern matching your bias strips. But this particular fabric is worth noting that it's something you can think about. It has a very regular pattern, and as you can see, where I just happened to sew the ends of my strips together, it sort of disrupted this pattern a little bit. On a big pattern like this, it's actually really easy to pattern match. So if you do want to do it that way, all you have to do is fold a diagonal line on an easy part of the pattern to see, and just move it up and down until you see where it matches. And you can see that if I were to sew my seam right here, I would have a perfectly consistent pattern match along my welt strip. So it's quick and easy to do. I'm going to go ahead and do it on this one. And we're just going to sew on that press line, and as you'll see, we'll have a nice continuous pattern matched bias strip. So you're going to sew together as many strips as you need for your project. In this case, I'm just doing a small pillow. 2 strips is plenty. So let's go to the machine, sew that together, and make our welt and put it on our pillow. Okay, y'all, let's sew our strips together. And there is our perfectly pattern matched joint. We will cut our seam allowances to reduce bulk and finger press it open. Now we're ready to set in our welt cord. If you have a regular household sewing machine, this is where you would put on your zipper foot. And if you have a needle adjustment that shifts your needle to the right or left, go ahead and move it over so that you can sew as closely to your welt cord as possible. If you've ever considered getting an industrial machine, if you're going to be doing a lot of sewing and you've ever considered getting an industrial machine, you can do this step with a zipper foot, which looks like this on an industrial sewing machine. But you can also use a welt foot. These come in every single size that welt comes in, and it's a foot that has a groove in the bottom of it that the welt cord runs through. and it works like this. You simply wrap your cord, and you'll see how the foot will just ride along this cord, and the needle will go right along the side and stitch a nice line. But because most people that are watching this video probably don't have a welt foot, I'm going to go ahead and put my zipper foot on. And I'm going to sew up my cord. Simply wrap. And I kind of use a long basting stitch for this. And all you do, line up your edges and sew. Doesn't get much easier than that. When you get to your seam, finger press it open. Just keep on going. There we go. So now, let's go ahead and apply this to our pillow. A couple of things I want to note. I'm going to be running my fabric where this is the top, this is the bottom. Maybe you can hear Tug see something outside. Probably a squirrel. Let's ignore him. My top and my bottom. If I'm just going to machine sew this pillow closed, I will stop and start my welt at the bottom because it's, you know, obviously the least noticeable place to have your join. However, if I'm going to be putting a zipper in here, I have noticed that just the join creates some bulk and some inconsistencies in the seam, and it sometimes makes it a little bit harder to get a really good looking zipper. So a lot of times if I'm putting in a zipper, I'll go ahead and stop and start my welt on the bottom right or the bottom left of my pillow. But because I'm just going to be sewing this one closed, no zipper today, I'm going to go ahead and start my welt application. I always leave a couple of an inch tail to start. So I'm just going to ballpark it right there, a couple of an inch to start. And at this point, you don't have to worry about getting really close to the pillow. This is really just, you're kind of just basting it on. When you put your front and your back together, you'll be more concerned about getting close to the edge. So right now I'm just basting it on. If you watched my video on the correct shape to make a square pillow, you'll see why I'm about to taper my welt in. So we talked about how we'll go from about 4 inches and we'll taper it in about half of an inch before we make our sharp pivot. So you're going to see me do that next on all 4 corners. And when I get to the corner, I just make a few snips so I can get a nice pivot point right where I want it. And that is the shape your corner is going to want to look like. Your slight taper in, your sharp pivot point, and just baste that on. Pivot, and then slowly taper back out to the edge. Do that on all 4 sides. Now here, keep in mind, don't pull this tight like that, where you're creating a curve and shortening your corner even more. Your taper takes care of the shape, and you just want a nice crisp pivot right there. Okay, now for the fastest and easiest way to make this join. So what you're going to want to do is overlap your two ends a couple of inches, like so. I mean, if you want to know exactly, we can measure. Yep, it's about about 2.5 inches. And first thing we're going to do is cut off our excess. Let's get a little bit closer. And you're going to want to sew just to about 1 inch from your join, so you have a little bit of room to work. The next thing you're going to do is take this piece that you're sewing on and snip your stitching to close to your presser foot. You just need a little bit of room to work with it here. And fold this out of your way and simply lay these two layers together next to each other. There's a couple of things you can do here. One is you can literally just take your scissors and cut this piece. Or if you have a type of welt cord that frays a lot like this one, and you don't want that mess at your join, one of the tricks that I use to make that join look really clean is I'll take a piece of Scotch tape, and right in the middle where I'm going to make that cut, I will just wrap the tape around. And I'm not trying to wrap it tightly. I don't want to change the diameter of my cord. I'm basically just stopping it from fraying. So there's my piece of tape, and now I can make my cut, and instead of a big frayed mess, I've got a nice clean cut. Now I've seen a lot of people show videos where you need to measure this and sew these pieces together and trim seam allowances. Honestly, I've never done it that way, and I've never needed to. I've never had a problem by not sewing these together. All I ever do is I fold a 45-degree angle in my fabric, finger press it to get a nice clean line, and lay my edges straight. If you feel like you don't have enough fingers, you can just tuck a pin right here, just to hold that in place as you learn to do it. Lay your welt cord down and roll it over and stitch it closed. Now here, you do want to be careful that this isn't loose. You do want to make sure that you are nice and snug. But really then just sew on over it. And now your welt cord is basted on, and you will have a nice, now this is an impossible place to pattern match. You cannot predict where your pattern on your welt's going to end, but you will have a nice flat join that will never go anywhere and will always look nice and clean. Now if this is going to be a pillow I machine sew closed, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the opening that I'm going to leave to put my pillow form in. I'm going to go ahead and snug that up right now. You can do it from either side of the pillow, but that way when you go to turn it right side out, your cord is going to be sewn nice and tightly on there. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm doing it on this side so you can see. little bit more clearly that I've snugged up that stitching line quite a bit. And in fact, you can see here, if I turn that pillow over right now, I've got a nice looking seam already. Next thing we're going to do is just put the front on the back. So here's another opportunity to give you a little tip. On this pillow, my front and back are cut out of the same pattern on the fabric, and I want them to match at the top and bottom of the pillow. Now, what a lot of people will do is they will perfectly line up this pattern and put a pin in a couple of spots, like so. See, I'm lining up the pattern. Now, if you do that all the way around and just sew around your pillow like you normally would, go to turn it right side out and expect to see a perfectly matched seam at the top, you're probably going to be a little bit surprised. Unless you have an upholstery machine or a walking foot machine that really holds these layers of fabric together as you sew, you're going to notice that as you're sewing, the pressure of this foot will push the fabric ahead of you a little bit. And you can kind of see when I do this. Press, 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 press. See, I've got some fullness here now. Even though your fabric is pinned together, you will find that just that little bit amount of pressure is going to push the fabric forward even just a 1/16 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch. And what will happen then is when you turn it right side out, you're going to see that you thought it was sewn perfectly together, but in fact it shifted a little, and your pattern is going to actually be off. So on a regular sewing machine, to offset this, what I always do is I actually line it up and then shift it in the opposite direction a little bit. So if my fabric is going to want to push that way, I'm actually going to shift it that way. It's just the smallest amount. You know, I'm talking maybe a 1/16 of an inch. But in my experience, I have found that that corrects the problem of your pattern moving. So see, I can line it up and shift it a little bit to the left. Line it up, shift it a little bit to the left. You know, this will come with practice, how much you need to shift, how much pressure your sewing machine puts on it. And you only have to do this in places where you really, really want the pattern to match. Along the side here, it's not a problem. You're not going to be matching anything. So just put in a few pins. And at the bottom, leave yourself plenty of room to leave an opening to get that pillow form in. You need more space than you might think. I usually just come in about 3 inches or so. I'll stop and start my sewing there. Okay, so now all we have to do is sew our pillow front to our pillow back. When you first start, go ahead and do several back tacks. This is a stress point here when you go to put your pillow form inside and you don't want your seam popping open, so I always do a really good strong back tack like this. Just press along with your finger to find the edge of your cord and start sewing. When you get to your corner, do a nice sharp pivot, find your edge, and go around. If you're wondering why these corners are clipped, this is actually my second shot at getting this on video. Right when I got to the point where I was sewing my front and back together, my camera stopped recording and I was not aware of it, so I clipped the corners, I finished the pillow, I turned it right side out, and then I find out my video didn't work. So y'all, I'm new at this, I'm going to be making mistakes, and you're going to make mistakes when you're learning to sew this stuff too. Just be patient, try again, and eventually you'll get it. So I'm going to show you something. Let me get to the end here. A nice strong back tack. If when you turn your pillow right side out, you feel like you didn't quite get close enough to the welt cord the first time, sometimes just going around it a second time from the other direction can help you get closer. But I actually am going to go around a second time, and I'm going to show you the difference using a welt foot can make. So let me pop my welt foot on here. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm just going to go around it with my welt foot. I'll just do part of it. I mean, look how much closer it got the second time. This is the first time with my zipper foot, and this is the second time with my welt foot. I gained a lot of space that time around. But like I said, even just flipping it over and using the same foot and just snugging it up again the second time around will get you very close to your welt cord. So then you would clip your corners and turn your pillow right side out. See how nicely my pattern is matching along that top seam where I shifted my fabric a little bit. And let's see if we can find our seam where we sewed our welt strips together. Can't even find it, so that's a good thing. And our join, when we sew the front and back together, you can kind of notice it because of where the fabric is, but you can see it's a nice flat join. So now all you need to do is check out the video that I made about how to insert a pillow form and machine sew it closed, and you will have made your very first pillow with welt. I hope it's the first of many. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please share it, subscribe to my channel, and let me know if you have any questions, concerns, or what you'd like me to teach you next. Thanks for watching, and happy sewing.